Hello, it's Lisa. Welcome back to another episode of the Wildheart Diaries. I'm so glad you're here. Honestly, I really am glad you're here. This roller coaster of starting all over again has been quite scary at times, although I quite like roller coasters. Do you? I remember going on Space Mountain repeatedly in Disneyland while the electrical light parade was on. Oh, flashback to my favourite holiday ever when I was a child. Loved the magic of Disney. I think most of us that were traumatised probably do. It's the best place in the world to escape, and it's full of ice cream, magic and fun, isn't it? Maybe what our childhoods should have been full of. Wow, wasn't expecting that to come out. Gone off on a complete tangent. I wanted to say thank you to you because on this roller coaster of a ride, I have doubted myself, I have cried, I have panicked. I have watched my stats go from episode 1, 40 listeners to 19, halved. But I'm like, no, Lisa, no. People have got to drop away. The more I become myself, the more I'm not like Smiley. I'm not like her. I'm becoming more like Lisa. So the more people will drop off. And so if you're one of those 19 people that are still listening, thank God you're here and thank you. And honestly, I'm so grateful for you. I wouldn't be doing this if you weren't listening. I wouldn't have a show. So if you'd like to support the show, please leave a review on iTunes. Lots of you have, and that's been really encouraging as well. Your messages on Instagram have been encouraging, your comments, your likes, your shares, your emails, all of that coming from that group of people or you as my loyal listeners. Honestly, best people ever. You're my people. And I know sometimes it probably feels weird reaching out to someone on Tinternet that you don't really know. But I feel like we are getting to know each other. I mean, I'm not really hiding anything from you, am I? Just letting it all hang out. Well, you know me. You know me. So, yeah. But, yeah, I couldn't do this amazing job without you. And I'm building this safe and supportive community of amazing wild hearts and navigating this change to allow my work to shift from children to inner children, as it were. I mean, it's made possible by you, and it's so much easier with you by my side. So I thought that was a nice way to open the show. Today we're going to be talking about inner teens. So inner teen is just another layer of inner child work. It's just a different stage of development and a different age in our lives. And the reason I want to talk about it today is because a couple of months ago, or maybe it was last month, my inner teen came up for healing. And I guess I hadn't been aware of her before. And that's mostly because I had so much inner child work to do. And I think what happened in therapy, I had to go through all the developmental milestones and rework some of that major stuff from before to provide more of a solid foundation, a stronger sense of self. And so my therapist became my parent. So that was my secure attachment. And then I internalized what she taught me. And now I'm able to reparent myself. And that's kind of how the process works. Or that's how I see the process in my mind. So our younger inner teen, well, it's the most awkward time of our life, isn't it? Or as my teens would say that I coach, totes orcs, Smiley. And, you know, I think the goal is to be with and soothe those awkward feelings. It's leaning into the uncomfortableness of your physical body, of social anxiety. I mean, and we're trying to settle in, aren't we? We're trying to settle in somewhere and feel like we belong. So if we belong to our families, we've got secure attachment with our families. And if you're listening to this, very likely that wasn't the case for you. And I'm sorry that wasn't the case. Then we won't be seeking that belonging outside of our families, or it'll be easy for us to belong. But if we didn't have that sense of belonging from our families, we'll have abandonment wounds and we'll fear rejection and we'll be super sensitive to rejection, and we will quite unintentionally, and I used to do this, put ourselves on the outside of a group of people. Then we don't run the risk of being rejected or making a fool of ourselves or feeling that awful dreaded shame that we're running from. So the bonding and the trust that we receive and learned as children sort of paves the way, and it provides that security we needed to risk relating to, you know, the opposite sex or same sex, what, you know, whatever your preferences are, whoever you choose to have romantic relationships with. And I also think that what's really important at that time is boundaries, right? Because you need to be able to set boundaries in sexual relationships. You need to be able to set boundaries so you don't succumb to peer pressure. If your boundaries were broken by your parents, or you were enmeshed with your parents like I was, so there were no boundaries in your house, you run the risk of being a people pleaser. So if everyone is taking drugs and passing a joint round, you're going to have it. If if a boy wants to sleep with you and you don't want to sleep with him and you're not quite ready for that, then you're not going to be able to say no, because you're scared of losing that relationship. But you've got low self-esteem and no self-respect. Now, I was always raised with good values actually around sex. So, to go slow, not to sleep with anyone that you didn't love. And so I was I was a late bloomer to that part of my life, but also because I was quite scared of it. And I was also really scared of drugs. So out of my group of friends, I was the mum, the fixer. So I was the designated driver. So we used to go to raves like in the middle of airfields when I was a teenager. And I'd be the designated driver on Pro Plus, which are like caffeine tablets, and drinking water. Although when we did go clubbing, I loved to smoke. I was so good at smoking. I think I've said this on here before, and I used to smoke loads. Like loads. I loved my 20 a day silk cut, and I smoked menthols for a while actually, consulates. I think I learned about those when I lived in France. French people, always when I think of French people, I see them with a cigarette, and but the smell of it now makes me feel sick. And I used to drink too much. Oh, who remembers Alka Pops, Bacardi Breezers, and vodka mules, and I can remember being in the toilets in a club and just throwing up everywhere. Anyway, let's not. I don't want to terrorize you with those images. But I think what I'm saying is, if you don't have boundaries in your family, if your family of origin don't have boundaries, you come to teenhood, you're a little bit behind everyone else. So you're very emotionally immature, perhaps emotionally stunted, and yeah, you can't say no. You're a people pleaser. So that's a really pronounced what we call friend or fawn response. That's the codependent, whereby we can't say no to people because we fear losing their love, which is just really a mirror of our relationship with our parents. We weren't allowed to say no. We didn't have boundaries. But whatever you couldn't master before the age of 12 is going to be a major stumbling block. So if you've got trauma and you've got an insecure attachment style and low self-esteem and you don't love yourself, then there's going to be a lot of stumbling blocks, and the awkwardness around being a teen is going to be huge. I'm thinking about body issues in particular. So I had, or I still have, and I'm working on my relationship with my body and food, terrible body dysmorphia. I look back at pictures of myself when I was a teenager, and I was a skinny little bean. I was slim. I'm not womanly in my shape. I'm quite boyish, straight up and down. I don't have a bust. I have a bottom. I suppose that's my curvy bit, my curvy bits, and long shapely legs. Actually, thanks to my dad, I have my dad's legs. He's got nice legs, but at the time, I thought I was grotesque. I had so much self-loathing for my body. I hated the summer because I wanted to cover up all my freckles. I hated having to wear sleeveless tops. I hated the fact that I didn't have boobs. I remember my mum taking me to buy my first bra, and I didn't really need one. And, I just wondered why my boobs weren't growing and everyone else's were. And I've got 3 sisters that are all quite blessed in that department, shall we say. So I didn't feel, I wasn't in my feminine energy. I wasn't in my, I didn't feel like a woman, or that I was becoming a woman. And also I had this really big need for peer approval. So I was gravitating towards relationships where I wasn't seen, where I was used by other people, or where people left me out and, ignored me or made fun of me. And again, that was just a mirror of what was going on at home. So I thought today that we'd connect into the energy of your inner teen. And there's quite a few ways that you can do this. As we're talking, you might have memories that pop up, and trust those memories because they're coming up for a reason. So whatever they are, you can journal on them. Just journal them out. As I'm storytelling to you, storytell back to yourself in your journal. Or you can go and grab a picture of yourself if you have a photo of yourself as a teen, and you can make eye contact with her, and you can look into her eyes and you can ask her what she remembers, what she needs from you, how she felt. Try and tune into the awkwardness of her. What was awkward? Maybe emotions were awkward. So it wasn't safe for me to be vulnerable. And I had so much rage and anger as a child, because by this point you're meant to be individuating because you're becoming separate from the family. And obviously I work with families, and it's really hard for parents to let go of the little girl that you are and allow you to become an adult. It's harder for some than others. Parents who create dependency, so they don't allow their children to be independent, so we call that infantilization. They really find it hard to let go of their kids, and that's about their trauma, and that needs addressing with a therapist. But what happens is that child doesn't feel safe to individuate, so then that's how they get emotionally stunted, I believe. So yeah, you can just trust that when you look into that photo, the eyes of yourself in that photo, or you're getting specific memories as we talk, just trust that whatever's coming up today needs to come up to be cleared. And, our bodies are very good at protecting us from memories that we're not supposed to know about. So don't be afraid of that. Just know that your body will lead you to where you need to go. I know it's hard to trust sometimes. I do know that is hard. And also it can be frustrating when you want to remember things and you can't, but there is a reason why. Because if that could bring up, for me, it brought up a lot of terror, and then that floods your body, and then you have what we call an emotional flashback, which is really just us regressing back to the way that we felt at that time. But if we're regressing back to that time, our rational brain has gone offline. And at that age, we didn't have the tools to deal with all of those big feelings, and neither did the adults around us. So before we get into the other journal prompts, let's just take a little break. In-person coaching is back. Yay! How would you like to meet up with me for a little coaching and a lot of magic this summer? My goal is to help as many wild hearts as possible step into their power and feel gorgeous from the inside out. And I haven't done any in-person coaching for years now, and I don't know if I'll do it again, but I feel the nudge to do it. My intuition is leading me to it. And so if you'd like to work with me, let me tell you about Wildheart Intuitive Intensives. They're a daytime intensive to love up on yourself and a chance for you to dive deeper into your heart's desires. We can tailor make this special time together for whatever you need, but ultimately I would like to guide you to reconnect back to your heart so that you can feel peacefully confident and love your lovely wild heart self. So we can create so much magic together this way. Inner child or inner teen discovery, intuitive guidance with the oracle cards, journaling, vision boarding, creative and expressive arts. Have all that toolkit from my time working with the little ones, energy rituals and energy medicine, whatever takes your fancy. I shall drop all the details in the show notes for you, and I would love to meet you. And if you're not local to me and you can't travel to Surrey, then I do have an online discovery day. That's another way that you can work with me. Not so deep in person, but still you can get good results. So I'm looking forward to meeting lots of wild hearts this summer so we can hang out together and make magic. So we're going to go back to journaling with our inner team. And as I say, always when we're journaling, make sure you're in a safe space and don't worry about things being edited. If you need to write it on a piece of paper and burn it or throw it away afterwards, you know, whatever you need to do to feel safe. I have a special space where I journal, and that's kind of like, it's like a little teepee or a tree house, you know, like a safe space. I don't have a teepee or a tree house in my flat, by the way, metaphorically speaking, you know, so that you can really tell the truth to yourself, because that's really important when you're healing. You have to tell the truth to yourself. A lot of our childhood was a mirage. It was what was presented to the outside world. We had to believe in the mirage in order to survive. But actually, the mirage was the mirage. And what was going on at home was hurting us deeply. And we felt unsafe. But we couldn't tell anybody. And that's traumatic. And that's the disconnect with ourselves and the people around us. And that's why when I used to work with kids, they used to feel so lonely. There was no like emotional nurturing, no emotional safety there. And that is so painful. So let's journal first of all on the awkwardness. Think about what was awkward for you at that time. Emotionally, as I say, were there emotions that you didn't feel like you were allowed to have? Did you get teased for crying? Did you get told you were oversensitive? I mean, boys can be, I'm going to be sexist now because girls can be just as bad, but I'm just thinking that, you know, boys at that age, because they are behind girls in their development, when you show emotion, they don't know how to deal with it. But equally, when they fancy you, they tease you and they're quite mean. So yeah, think about emotionally what was awkward for you, what emotions were awkward. If you can tune into those feelings in your body, so if you're looking at your photo, if you can close your eyes because you're having the memory and it feels safe to do so, search out those feelings where they live in your body and just put your hands on them and breathe into them and just let them be. Just breathe into them, just let them, they're like waves, just let them come and go and do what they need to do. Or what about physically, as we've said, like how did you feel about your body? So I was terrible because I was suppressing my appetite with cigarettes, but then equally when I was emotionally overwhelmed, I would eat like a whole packet of hot cross buns walking home from the station, this is when I was at college, to my house, and feel sick, and then eat dinner, and then eat pudding, and then go to my room and feel disgusted with myself. And that was a cycle that I repeated quite a lot. And then I would do exercise and be good. I'm doing sort of Ross from Friends air quotes when I say be good. My mum and dad were very into dieting, and I can remember that from before my teens. My dad used to go on this diet called the Scarsdale diet, where he he must have eaten less than 1,000 calories. And my mum was always doing like Jane Fonda workout videos, and she would go to exercise classes, and we did the Rosemary Connolly low fat diet. So we would eat like that as a family, which it kind of, when we limit food like in that way, and we say that we label foods as good or bad, then we grow up with those beliefs around food. And so we're either depriving ourselves of something that we want, or we're overindulging in something that makes us feel sick and bad. But it's neither good nor bad. Like if you eat intuitively and you're listening to your body, then you just eat when you're hungry, right? Which is something that I'm learning now at my age, in my late 40s. So think about if you were overly self-conscious about the way you looked. I'm sure all teenagers are. Before you hit puberty, you go through that really kind of sort of dumpy phase, I think, where you need to grow a few inches, and then you do, and your teeth are falling out and everything's a bit crooked and a bit wonky, isn't it? And you don't really, you're just working out who you are. You're just becoming you. Like the caterpillar has to go into the chrysalis to become the butterfly, and it has to sit in really dark, gooey space to do that. It's very awkward and uncomfortable. And then think about what you worried about as a teen. Like, where was your teen angst? I suppose we'd call it angst. Were you worried about, did you compare yourself to other people? Because all of that stuff is probably with you now. And so if you can go back and unpack it, and you'll do it in layers. You won't, like, maybe you'll listen to this episode more than once. Or maybe, or maybe you'll take it to your therapist and ask if you can specifically work on your teen angst or your teen awkwardness. Another thing you can journal on is, did you feel shy in romantic relationships, or did you feel inhibited sexually? Like, did you feel embarrassed to kiss someone? Did you think sex was naughty or forbidden? Or, because I guess when you're a teenager, you find out stuff like that. I mean, I think I read about it in magazines. I had a magazine called 17, I remember, and they'd have like the problem page, and also we used to get the Sunday papers, like the trashy Sunday papers. That's highly sexualized, like page 3 back in the day in the 80s, where you'd have like page 3 models, and there'd be very salacious stories about what footballers were up to, and I kind of learnt about the nitty gritty of sex from reading that kind of stuff. Yeah, so when you think about your romantic relationships, or how your first love, when you think about, were you the pursuer or the chaser? I mean, goodness me, I grew up with sisters and not really around boys. I had friends that had brothers, and they were much more comfortable with boys because they knew how boys were. I didn't really. I mean, I had my dad, but I didn't really know how to be around boys. And because I was so desperate, is the only way I can describe it, to be seen and to be loved, I would chase boys. I probably intimidated them. Bloody scary. But I have compassion for that teen part of me who was so... it was just looking for love in all the wrong places and not finding it, obviously just being drawn to people that couldn't see me and that didn't love me. And that sort of sense of desperation, puts people off. It's very sad, actually. It's very sad because I didn't understand. I didn't understand what was happening. I just naturally assumed that everyone was going to reject me as time went on. And, that was kind of mirroring what happened with my family of origin. So that was my pattern, and it wasn't in my conscious awareness, so I couldn't do anything about it. I just naturally assumed that I wasn't going to meet anyone, and that was the end of it. Did you, there's another journal question, did you have an inappropriate need for other people's approval? But when you're approval seeking, you're just looking for what you didn't get from your parents. And I guess what that looks like from a good enough parenting perspective is just that love is not conditional. You're not loved when you're a good girl and you're doing what your parents want you to do. You're loved and accepted as you are. And yeah, you're loved and accepted as you are. And you know that even if you did wrong, that you would be forgiven. That was only the case for me if I was going to go back and say sorry for a bunch of stuff that I didn't do. So I didn't know that I was going to be forgiven. So think about if you were using substances or being destructive. So we call that self-destructive. We're either acting in or acting out. So acting in is when we turn it in on ourselves. So that's like me smoking, starving myself, binging, eating, talking to myself unkindly, bullying myself. Just the voice of your parents becomes your inner critic. And my inner critic is a bitch. She's relentless. And she hates me and she just nitpicks at me all the time. I can never get it right. So, yeah. What's your inner critic like? And, yeah, so were you acting in or acting out? So acting out is when you do go and, you confuse love and sex, and you do use sex to get attention from boys, or you're very angry and rageful and you break things, or you sabotage friendships and relationships because of your low self-worth. You don't believe that you have that worthiness wound of, you don't believe that is possible for you. You don't believe that you deserve love and time and attention from other people. In fact, you might even feel like a burden. You might feel like you're taking up too much space in the room. I'm just riffing on these questions, so whatever comes to mind for you, just make a note of them in your journal. And did you feel socially inadequate? See, that's something I never felt, because you know me, I'm such a big chatterbox. But we were the house of madness. We had people round every weekend. We were always entertaining. People used to pop round for coffee. In fact, as an HSP, I hated it because there was never a quiet place where I could just go and be left alone. Don't be in your room. Come down and be sociable. Come down and say hello to everyone. Kiss everyone goodnight. Come down and play board games. Come down and be part of it all. But that was more for my parents to say, look at our lovely family. Look at, we were always entertaining everybody. And so I had good social skills, and my dad was quite instrumental in that, because I went to work in his shop when I was a teenager. My dad's a butcher, or he was a butcher. And he had quite a few shops at one point. And I used to go to one in London and work there. And so I learned how to smile and say hello. And I mean, we were always very good with our pleases and thank yous. My parents were quite strict on please may I leave the table manners, asking permission for things. So, but that comes from, I think a lot of that came from my dad, if I remember. That was something my dad instilled in us. And I think that was something his mum instilled in him. And he's very polite, my dad. And my dad is very shy. Maybe I'll talk more about my dad if I do an episode on Father's Day. He's actually very, very shy, my dad. And he's a massive introvert. But, we lived in this house that was just like party all the time. And that was from my mum, maybe. I don't know what that was like for him. I couldn't say. I don't think he could say either, because he wouldn't want to piss my mum off. So there's some journal prompts for you. So the way that my teen, this is a funny story. I can't try and keep it short and not go on a rant. But the way that my teen came up to be healed was, there's a bit of a history with my Facebook audience on social media. So I had a community of about 2,000 parents that followed me on Facebook. If you're one of those parents that's still here listening, I'm probably not talking about you, because you're still here and you're interested in what I've got to say. So please don't think I'm talking about you. But there was a whole bunch of people on there anyway. Some of them were like competitors or people that were trying to copy me and steal my ideas. I sound paranoid, but I really am not, because I got to see over time that people just wanted all the free stuff, and they never used to spend money or really value me at all. They wouldn't even give me a like or a comment. I think I've said all this before, so I'm not going to get into that. But because of my compulsion repetition, which has been part of this pivoting my business from being Smiley to being Lisa and working with adults, and I've talked about that in the first episode. When you are acting out your trauma and you've got compulsion repetition, sometimes you don't realize you're doing it. And it was almost like one final fling, and my therapist did identify it as being a bit self-sabotagey, because I was actually doing really well with all my new stuff. So it's kind of like I went back to feel shit again, because that's more comfortable to feel shit about myself than it is to do well and be successful. And I went onto my Facebook page, and it was around Easter time, so not that long ago. It was April. We're in June now. And I wrote a very blanket generic post, and I said, why as a society are we spending money on Easter eggs and we don't spend money on children's mental health? Like, what the fuck is what I wrote. And yeah, it was an inflammatory statement, and it was designed to get people thinking, and I knew it would make people respond. But I wasn't expecting people to respond in the way that they did. And, when you're having a debate about something, you debate about the argument, don't you? You don't attack the person that's stating the truth. And obviously for lots of people that press their shame buttons, and because they're not aware that they carry shame or even trauma, they just went for me. And I couldn't believe what people were writing. These are people who followed me for 10 years, have taken everything I've got to offer. And then when it came down, not all of them, there were some people that liked my post and kind of like, yeah, I see where you're going with that. But bearing in mind that I didn't actually name any names, I didn't say, why are parents so crap? Or why do teachers do this? Or why is the government? I said, why as a society? Because I always look at us as collectively responsible and saying, how did we get to where we are? Why have we evolved to be focused on buying fucking 10 Easter eggs from the supermarket for kids and not spending money on their mental health? Well, you know why? Because Big Pharma is making a lot of money out of drugs. We're drugging children. So not only are we filling them up with sugar, we're drugging them. See, I get really angry because that's not the answer. The answer lies within family systems, within, it's at grassroots level, and it lies within our education system, which needs a massive overhaul. But there were so many things that people could have said off that post that could have made a really good debate about, how mental health is unsupported, how it's still really stigmatized, how children that are statemented have such low self-esteem because they get treated like they are different to their peers, so they don't feel accepted, and that impacts their self-esteem. I could go on about that for hours. I won't, but I've worked with lots of those children, and I'm telling you now that they don't all need to be medicated. They come from homes that are riddled with trauma, unprocessed trauma, toxic puddle stuff, big toxic puddle stuff. So anyway, there was one woman in particular who will remain nameless, and she'll probably never listen to this, because she stormed off my page in a mood and said, I'm unfollowing you. And I was like, well, fine, just unfollow me then. Like, shut the door on your way out. Don't need to announce it. I was so livid. But she said that I was parent bashing, and that my post was, argumentative and always having a go at parents and blah, blah, blah. And it triggered the shit out of me and this was when my inner teenager came up, and I sat with it for quite a few days, and I took it to my therapist. She was lovely. She said, all these leeches, and then they come back and attack you because you're telling the truth and they don't want to hear it. They weren't her exact words. I'm paraphrasing, but obviously she's on my side. We had a discussion about it. And at the end of the day, I'm not here to blame anyone, because I come from a family where I was blamed for bloody everything. So I'm not going to do that to other people, but I will hold people accountable. And at the end of the day, it stops with the parents. They are responsible for those kids. And some of them have just obviously been and bought Easter eggs. And the reason I chose Easter eggs, because it was Easter, and I thought, well, I could have said anything. I could have said iPads, trainers, holidays. I could have said anything, but I picked Easter eggs because I thought they're relatively cheap. They're not good for kids. Let's consider our choices more. So anyway, this lady and I got into a little bit of a heated debate, and I pulled myself away from my laptop because I realised that I might have been triggered, but I didn't really understand why. And, I was being publicly attacked for parent bashing. For fuck's sake. I will hold them accountable. They don't like it. And what transpired was, before I got to my therapist, I sat on my sofa and I had a quiet moment. And I do this thing, and it's part of my rambling, which is one of my 5 R's of self-love, which you can check out in the episode called The 5 R's of Self-Love. So I was rambling to myself. I might be rambling a bit now, because as I'm telling you, I can feel that my heart rate's gotten up because it makes me quite emotional. So I have this conversation where I call in my therapist. So I stare at a blank wall and I can see her face, and I call her in because I've internalized her. So it's easy for me to have this conversation. And so, we're having this chat, and she says to me, what is it? What's going on for you? And so I started to say, I don't know. And then from the I don't know came this massive rush of energy, and it came bursting through my chest. And she said to me, or her voice in my head said, how old are you? And I said, I'm about 13 or 14. And I said, I just want people to know that I'm a good person. For because in my family, I wasn't. I was the emotional trash can. I was my mum's emotional caretaker. I took on all of her shame. And so it was my shame that had been triggered as well. But interestingly, I was aware that I'd been triggered, and I didn't attack this woman who attacked me, who'd also been triggered. Her shame had been triggered. And actually I was very kind to her. I just said to her, listen, you must do what you think is right. If you must go, leave, you know. But inside, my inner team was going, fuck you. Fuck you. You won't tell me that. You're not telling me who I am. Also, she was massively overstepping my boundaries. She was on my business page and I was inviting people to have a conversation, and she just went for me. So, you know, and she claimed to be a counsellor and had been in therapy. So maybe she needs a new therapist, and I'm not sure if I would go to her for therapy because she doesn't seem to be self-aware. Maybe afterwards she was. Who knows? I don't know. I don't even know her. And that's the other thing that really got me. I was like, all these motherfuckers that are coming on my page to have a pop at me, you've not spoken to me for years. You've not liked, you've not commented, you've not shared. You've just sat there and taken and taken and taken from me. And now you want to do this. I was like, I'm done. And it was almost like, and I guess it was a bit self-sabotagey, that I had to go out in a puff of smoke. Because that's what my teen self would have done. I would have stormed off to my room and slammed the door and said, I hate you. And so it was lovely. And actually, from that session on my sofa that I had with myself, with my internalized therapist, I had a massive, massive trauma release. And I'm not going to get into that now because I'm going to do a whole episode on trauma releases and what they've looked like for me over time. They're not always big panic attacks like that one was. Some of them are very subtle. And so I'm going to talk to you about what they look like, because that might be helpful to you, because that's another reason why people don't want to go to therapy and start healing, because they think it's going to be more than they can manage, or they're going to disappear into a big black hole, or it's going to hurt. Yeah, it does hurt, but it only hurts as much as you can tolerate. And you know, you blow a lot of snot bubbles and use up a lot of tissues. You know that you've got to grieve if you want to heal. So my teen, her message was, I want to be seen as a good person. And as I explored that more with myself before this big trauma release happened, I identified how hurt I was by my family. And I had never admitted that to myself up until now. Miss Super Independent, Miss I am the parent, I am in charge, I'm the eldest daughter, no one's going to tell me what to do, I don't need your help, I'll do it for myself. You know, very much that was my inner teen. And I was just hurting so much. And so all that anger and all that rage was just hurt. And it was stuck grief. And that lady on Facebook, thank you. Thank you so much for being my teacher and showing me where I needed to do the work and where I needed to heal. And I hope since that has happened, that episode that happened on Facebook, I've never been back to Facebook since that day. I have not been back. I made a promise to myself. I said to my inner teen, I'm not letting you go on there and let those people speak to you like that. How fucking dare they, after the service that you've done to that community for 10 years? How fucking dare they? And I will not let them. And so my anger was righteous anger, and it was great because it was being brought in to protect me. It wasn't out of control rage. And I said to my teen self, you are not going on that page again. We are not doing this anymore. And that was how I let go of Smiley. Finally. Finally. So yeah, I mean, before I go today, I want to read to you a poem that I wrote, which came off the back of that whole sort of inner teen work, that release. I then went to therapy, spoke to my therapist about it, had some more release, did some more sound tray therapy, and then I wrote the poem, which I'd like to share with you today. But before I do share the poem with you, I want to give you a positive journal prompt to journal on. And the question I want to ask your inner teen is, what were your strengths? Now, if a specific memory comes up, work with that. But write about that and process it, and offer your teen self love, unconditional regard and validation, and possibly some protection from people that let her down and disappointed her, because that is what she needs. Oh, I'm doing burps now because I'm very emotional. Very emotional telling you that story. Yeah. The hurt's still there. The hurt's still there, and it's layers. It's layers, guys. You peel back the layers and you keep doing the work. And as you journal, you drill down, and more of the emotion gets released. And this is how we do it, as the song goes. This is how we do it. And you know, I couldn't have acknowledged how much my family were hurting me, or how much my mum was bullying me or physically abusing me, because I had to be in a relationship with those people. I had to live in a house with them, and that's how I survived. And so that 13-year-old was pushed deep down inside of my psyche, and it wasn't until that lady came on Facebook and called me a parent basher that she got to see the light of day. So, you know, it's all good. Anyway, should we read this poem? Let's read this poem together. With love to my angry teen self, a poem. Sweet gal, just take him in. You got nothing to prove to this world that seems to want to self-destruct. You have that button too, you know that much. You've got nothing to prove. You're okay. It's all right. Breathe, just breathe, and give up the fight. Know that deep in your heart a sea of rage bubbles away. It goes back to your day as a hot-headed teen. So much love and validation for the times you weren't seen. I'm listening to you now. You've got my full attention. Tell me all about how you diffused your family's tension. You told hard-hitting truths and absorbed all their pain. I'm never going to let them do that again. You're safe now. In me you can rest. You've got nothing to prove. I know you tried your very best. I saw you desperate to make their wrongs right. Your tangled thoughts kept you awake at night. They blamed you for all they refused to see, whilst robbing you of your spirit and sanity. It all began before you were born, and without truth it stays the same. It gets passed forward, the hurt will remain. When you ask, what's wrong with me? Nothing. The pain is theirs. They hold the key. I know they made you feel so ashamed of being human. You weren't going to be tamed. Trauma bleeds over the next generation until somebody says, no, I'm getting off at this station. Know that there is nothing you can do that would make me not love you. What you've done to turn this shit around, I'm hugely proud that in the darkness you found your purest spirit full of love and creativity, still smiling with your fierce tenacity. A lonely path was your choice. No chance they will silence your voice. You taught people how to reclaim their power. Rise up, do better. You didn't let things turn sour. You knew deep down there was no other way. Don't listen to what the flying monkeys say. You've got nothing to prove. They are blind. I won't let them fuck with your mind. When you feel frustrated and misunderstood, please remember that God is good, and so are you. You are loved unconditionally. You're my sweet gal, and you've got me by your side to protect and take care of you. Keep doing what feels right and true. Do what brings you joy. That's something they cannot destroy. Ignorant people will contest. They will insist they're doing their best. Leave them with their disrespect in denial. No need to react. That's not your style. It's none of your business anymore. You're moving on and closing the door. You don't need their permission to live life your way. There's really nothing else to say. You've wholeheartedly given it your all. They need to make their own mistakes. Let them fall. Be a light in the darkness. Love them at arm's length. Humans are messy, but they have so much strength. That's exactly how you were reborn. No need to stand there and take their scorn. Get excited for what the future holds. Take the lessons, they're pure gold. Sweet girl, let it go. Hold your head up high. Spread your wings. Trust yourself. It's time to fly. So lovely, Wild Hearts. If you have a rageful, angry teenage self, maybe it's justified, and maybe she needs to let that out or be doused in compassion and kindness and set her free. So that's it for today's episode. And until next time, stay wild, choose love. So much love to you and your inner teen. Bye for now.